Hey guys, welcome back to another video. In this one, I wanted to address something that I've been asked a lot, and that is prioritization of spending your magical books, especially early game into mid game. And the first thing I wanted to look at was very early game. I have said this before in the 2-star army videos, but the first thing I'd be using my books on is the first stage evolution of 3-stage evolution monsters. A perfect example is this water arcane bird. Its first stage evolution, as you can see, it doesn't take any of the larger essences to evolve. So they're the sort of essences you can farm quite easily just in doing level 1 or 2 of Tower of Houses in the Elemental Towers to get that first evolution, and you might get a good skill that helps you out a bit, plus you get some more stats to help you with that very early progression when you're still just working your way through the scenarios, farming up some vitality glyphs, and all that sort of thing. So things like your water arcane bird, the wind golem if you're using him, the wind unicorn if you're using him, those sorts of things, they're easy to do the first stage evolution. So I'd get that out of the way, and that would be the first thing I spend my books on. After that, when you're still struggling to farm higher levels of the elemental dungeons and stuff, it's not quite worth your time yet trying to get those high essences to evolve. That's my opinion anyway. So the next thing I'd look at doing in that really early game stage is skilling up priority skills that have a very low requirement to get a good effect. For instance, this second skill on the water bird, with one skill up into it, obviously you got to get lucky and hit it, so you might waste a couple in between. But with one skill up into this second skill, you get the attack break instead of landing on all enemies for 1 turn becomes 2 turns. That is very efficient. But once you get that in these early stages, I'd stop doing skill ups on the waterbird. Then I'd look at your other monsters that have the same sort of valuable skill ups. So things like the wind golem's another prime example, because I know you won't use him as much late game, but early game, that defense buff, if you can get one upgrade into his second skill to make it a 2-turn defense buff on a 2-turn cooldown, you also get that heal increase. That's just a very valuable one, very cheap to do. Like I said, you might waste a couple trying to get that skill up, but once you get it, it is just the first skill up that you need. And then the same thing goes with the wind unicorn on the third skill. It only needs 1 skill up to get a cooldown reduction. That's the cleanse and the speed buff. And other units, luxury units if you pull, things like the water tree, even if you pull him in that very early stage, I would make him a very high priority on max skilling his third skill, because the water tree is fantastic as is, but this third skill without skill ups is a 6-turn cooldown and only a 2-turn defense buff. With those 3 skill ups into that, it becomes a 3-turn defense buff with your 2-turn poison mail, 3-turn regenerate on a 4-turn cooldown. It's an amazing ability, and this, once you get this maxed out, it allows him, it's not 100% perfect until you get a little bit better glyphs, but he can act as a solo healer and defense buffer. So he fills those 2 roles, plus he fills an extra poisoner role. So he's fantastic. Those sorts of things on monsters that need those skill ups to be effective are the next sort of thing you want to look at. Another perfect example of this would be, I know some people have pulled her and absolutely love her. I think on paper she looks like a great unit too, and I think she'd be a great option for a healer early game, and that is the Earth Pixie. So she looks a little underwhelming when we look at her third skill as a base. It's a speed buff and a regenerate for 2 turns on a 5-turn cooldown. Doesn't seem like much uptime. It's not a massive heal, and it's a longish cooldown. But when you get the upgrades into it, it becomes a 30% heal with the regen up for 3 turns and the speed buff up for 3 turns on a 4-turn cooldown. So it becomes a very high uptime heal and speed buff, which are both fantastic things. And it's a very decent amount of healing. And the cooldown is 4 turns, but because of the 3-turn duration of the effects, it's fantastic. So that's another thing I'd look at. She really needs those skill ups to be fully effective, and that's the sort of thing I would look at skilling up next. After that, I'd look at vital effects for your team, like effects that are really important. And for me, one that I wouldn't be able to pass up if you're using him, that is the Earth Basilisk. So I did this on my 2-star army account. I max skilled him. And just because of this second skill in the Wrath dungeon, it's super handy to have that down to a 2-turn cooldown for a 2-turn stun. It's just amazing. And worst case, if you happen to max out his 3rd skill first, you still get a cooldown reduction on his AoE poison. He's another fantastic one. That's the skilling up sort of priority. After that, I'd look at maybe looking into your normal healer if your healer doesn't have like necessary skill ups to work. So something like the Water Nymph that I used early game, her heal is on a 3-turn cooldown as standard. So it's a short cooldown early, so you get it up very often. So it's actually easy to use without skill ups. But then as you skill it up, it just gets better because you get more healing. But with the healers that have that longer cooldown, you really want the cooldown reduction so that they can heal more often. In case they wasted on the last wave of a stage in a dungeon, on the last monster, sorry, and then it's not up for that 4, 5, 6 turns. You really need those cooldown reductions. After that, or you can toss up between doing that sort of thing on the Nymph or looking at skill ups into, for instance, the Water Bird, who I've been lazy with. I never max skilled mine, but with this second skill, getting a cooldown reduction, attack break probability increased, that's also fantastic. And you also get a cooldown reduction on this 3rd skill, which is the speed slow and the shield. Both fantastic things to have. Increase the mitigation, slow down your enemies more often. It's awesome skills to have. Like I said, I was lazy. I never end up skilling mine up, but that's another good one to prioritize after that. I sort of got held up in the skilling up side of things, but another thing I want to mention, when you're progressing from that early game stage, you've sort of got your team 4-starred and max level type thing. You can then jump into those elemental dungeons and do the higher levels. That's when I'd be saving books to do all your evolutions. So you want to get all your monsters fully evolved and before you start heading into the dungeons. So that then becomes a priority. Once you're in sort of that mid-game stage where you've got your core team sort of all evolved, some skilled up to where you want them, you might still be working on a few skill ups. If you pull a good replacement unit, the first thing I do, especially where I'm at now, my first priority is evolving them, getting the stats. Once you know you can farm those sort of level 4, 5, 6 and above of the elemental dungeons, that's when I'd say evolution is the priority, and then skill ups. Just because getting those extra stats, the extra ability on the first skill, they're all very important. So that's sort of the priority I'd go with anyway. But like I said, everyone plays the game differently. This is just what I found to be efficient, and I know there's a lot of people that also like to try and be as efficient as possible, and I just thought I'd share how I experienced the game the couple times I've played through it and the sort of things I did. So I hope this helps you guys out with book prioritization, just because I know books are a very scarce resource early game and you don't want to be wasting them and needing them for something that you've already spent them on other things. So hope this helps, and I'll look forward to seeing you guys in the next video. Cheers.